They say that family is our safe haven. That no matter what happens, it's where we return. For a long time, I believed this. I believed it because that's what they told me, what they repeated until it became law within me. And I followed this law like someone fulfilling a sacred promise. My name is Maya. I'm the daughter of Grace and Thomas, Victor's older sister. For years, I was the pillar of this family. The daughter who said yes, who helped, who gave herself completely. The woman who listened to insults, put up with criticism, did favors and still smiled at the end. For a long time, I thought that was what love was, sacrificing yourself for the good of others. But you know what nobody tells you? That when you start saying no, their love disappears. Everything started to fall apart the day I decided to do things differently. I started setting boundaries. I started to refuse the loans they always asked me for. I stopped paying their credit card bills, Netflix bills, and all the other expenses that, when they couldn't pay, they always asked me to pay. I used to do it before, but I decided to put a stop to it, to set a limit. After all, I had to prioritize my children, my husband, and myself. Victor, my brother, was always the protected one. The son who never made a mistake, even when he was clearly in the wrong. And, of course, everything bad he did was minimized, while my successes became an obligation. It was as if I was always in debt. An invisible, eternal debt. The last straw, however, didn't fall with Victor. It fell with my parents. After they asked me to pay the 3 months' rent that they had failed to pay, because they had used the money to travel with Victor. After years of dealing with this type of emotional blackmail and veiled requests, I finally said, enough. It was difficult. Their silence was heavy. But for the first time, I felt something different, relief. Daniel, my partner, was the first to notice. He looked at me one day, after a particularly bitter visit from my mother, and said, Maya, do you realize that you always come back from these conversations sadder than when you left? At that moment, something clicked that I had been putting off for years. It was true. That was not a healthy relationship. It never was. Of course, the breakup was not well received. Victor showed up at my house a week later, with that usual condescending tone, trying to make me understand, as if I were a rebellious child. He wanted me to apologize. For having said no, for having defended my children, for having defended myself. Sophia and Noah, my little ones, were in the living room. And I remember exactly the look of fear on their faces when they saw their uncle yelling at their mother. That gave me strength. I held on tight, looked at Victor and said, no one who yells is allowed in here. He left, slamming the door. The next day, Grace sent me a message. A long text like she always did. The kind full of flourishes, passive aggressiveness, and phrases like, you were so different before that man came into your life. Oh yes, it was Daniel's fault. It was always easier to find someone else to blame than to admit that, perhaps, I had woken up. And I had woken up to a world where love is not control, where respect is not a bargaining chip, where I don't need to annul myself to be accepted. Grace and Thomas still tried to appeal. They used their grandchildren as an argument. Are you going to take the children away from their grandparents? They would say. As if they had some real emotional connection with them. They didn't call on birthdays, never asked how they were, but suddenly, they became the grandparents of the year. I decided then that it was time to protect what really mattered, my peace and my children. I started therapy. I never imagined how transformative it would be. For the first time, I saw myself as someone who also deserved care. And not just the care I gave to others, but the care I received. Or rather, what I learned to give myself. Sophia and Noah began to open up more. They laughed more lightly. Daniel was more present than ever. Our home became a refuge. A bubble of affection, security, and truth. But like every good story of reconstruction, the past does not accept being ignored so easily. On New Year's Eve, the house was lit up, full of laughter, the smell of good food in the air, children running around with those party hats half askew on their heads. Sophia and Noah did not stop moving, anxious for the midnight countdown. Daniel served glasses of sparkling wine, smiling with that calm way that anchored me. It was the first time in a long time that I felt that kind of joy without guilt, without fear. It was just us, the only thing that mattered. But then, the doorbell rang. I froze. The glass almost slipped from my hand. Daniel looked at me, trying to hide his tension. Do you think that? I didn't need to answer. I knew. I could feel what was about to happen. I walked to the door, each step heavy as lead. When I opened it, they were there. Grace, Thomas, Victor, and his wife Marina. All of them with that controlled little smile, as if they were trying to hide that they were in an ambush. What are you doing here? My voice came out firmly, even with my heart hammering in my chest. My mother smiled. That sweet smile that only appeared when she wanted something. We just want to talk, Maya, nothing more. I'm not interested in talking, I answered without hesitation. My father sighed loudly, impatiently, as if he was wasting precious time. That's enough, Maya. You've done your act. Now let's resolve this before things get out of hand. I frowned. Get out of hand? What are you talking about? I saw Grace and Victor exchange a look. Marina looked away. Victor stepped forward, arms crossed, full of poise. They consulted a lawyer, he said, as if throwing a bomb in the middle of the room. The air left my lungs. A lawyer. I repeated, trying to understand. My mother nodded, feigning calm. We're just worried. You took your children away from the family because of a misunderstanding. That's not fair to them. My stomach churned. I knew that tone. It was emotional blackmail disguised as concern. What are you trying to say? I asked, more to confirm what I already feared. My father cleared his throat. We were just researching grandparents' rights, that's all. I understood right then. They wanted to threaten me with taking my children away from me. That sentence hit me like a punch. My ears started ringing. For a second, the world seemed to spin. And then, I laughed. It wasn't a giggle. It was an unstable, almost hysterical laugh. Did they really think they could threaten me with that? Victor frowned. What's so funny? I wiped away a tear that escaped from my laughter and took a deep breath. Do you really think a judge will look at this situation and side with you? My mother's smile disappeared. We didn't do anything wrong, she replied. I crossed my arms firmly. Nothing wrong? You isolated me, manipulated me, sucked everything I had. And when I finally said enough, you decided to try to force me to come back. Do you want to see what's wrong? I took my cell phone out of my pocket and held it tightly. I have all the messages. Every request for money. Every blackmailing audio. Every toxic comment. And if you dare to take this any further, I swear, I'll expose everything. Marina, who had been silent until then, seemed to choke. Maya, please, you don't have to get to this point. Oh, you do? I replied, my blood boiling. You don't have an affair nor any morals, and if you keep pressuring me, I guarantee the world will know exactly who you are. Silence. A silence so thick that I could hear the clock in the living room ticking away. My mother's face contorted. There was nothing sweet about her anymore. You're being irrational, she said dryly. I smiled. A calm, almost amused smile. No, Mom. For once, I'm being smart. I turned my back, grabbed the doorknob, and looked over my shoulder. Happy New Year. And I slammed the door. On the other side, nothing, not a word, not a knock. They knew they had lost, that they had nothing. That night after midnight, I watched Sophia and Noah jump with their little hands up, shouting Happy New Year. Daniel hugged me from behind and whispered in my ear, You were amazing. And I believed it. The following days, silence. No messages. No calls. And for the first time in years, that was peace. The following days were strangely silent. No notifications on the cell phone. No unidentified calls. No notes left in the mailbox. The world seemed to have paused, and this time, I didn't rush to fill the void. I welcomed it. At first, I confess I was suspicious. I thought the silence was just the calm before the next storm, but the storm didn't come. And little by little, that silence stopped being a threat and became a relief. A new kind of peace began to settle in, one I had never known before. And that was when I realized how accustomed I was to chaos. Pain had become my natural habitat for so long that I no longer knew how to live without it. But in that new stillness, something inside me began to blossom. The days turned into weeks, and I began to rebuild my own rituals. I began to take my time tending to the garden. I began to take walks with Daniel at dusk, while the children rode their bikes. Sophia told me she wanted to learn how to draw. Noah asked me to help him build a robot out of scrap materials. And there I was, present. No distractions, no fear of a phone call ruining my day, no need to prepare emotional defenses before opening a message. It was like breathing fresh air after years in a vicious environment. One afternoon, while I was folding clothes in my room, I heard Noah telling his sister a story about monsters that lived hidden in closets. He said, "But Mommy scared them all away. Now our house is protected." That hit me in the chest with an indescribable tenderness. I had no idea how they were watching everything, feeling everything. Even without understanding the details, they knew. They knew that something had changed, that their mother had finally taken control of her own story. And for the first time, I felt like I was being the woman I wanted them to see as an example. Months later, on a spring morning, I opened the living room windows and let the breeze in. The scent of newly bloomed flowers spread through the house. Daniel was in the backyard, playing with the children. Sophia had made a crown of daisies and placed it on her brother's head, who was pretending to be a king. They laughed loudly. A clean, free laugh. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea in my hands. The sun warmed my face, and for the first time in a long time, there was nothing pulling me back to the past. No trace of guilt, fear, or insecurity. Only gratitude. And a strange but wonderful feeling of victory. Daniel approached slowly and handed me a lemonade. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting down next to me. "How everything is peaceful," I answered, almost surprised to hear it come out of my mouth. He smiled, that smile that said, "I understand you," without needing words. "Do you think they'll try anything again?" I looked at the children in the yard. Sophia trying to catch soap bubbles with her hands, Noah laughing as they burst in the air. I took a deep breath, took a sip of tea, and just shook my head. "Maybe, but it doesn't matter." "No?" Daniel asked. "No," I repeated firmly. "Because now I know who I am and what I've built here with you, with them. No one else can touch that." He looked at me with that glow that mixed admiration and love. He squeezed my hand. "Yes, you won, Maya." And yes, I had won. Not because I defeated anyone, but because I chose to stop fighting wars that weren't mine. Because I stopped begging for acceptance from those who only knew how to hurt me. Because for the first time, I chose myself. It didn't matter anymore if my parents and brother would try to blackmail me again. I had already cut those ties that hurt me so much. I learned that even though we are of the same blood, we shouldn't put up with others just because of that. If these people hurt us, we should distance ourselves. And I was prioritizing my real family, my children and my husband. Valuing our connection and taking care of our union. I would never want to repeat with my children what my parents did to me. Therapy was helping me deal with these traumas. And what about my parents and Victor? Well, they have to deal with their own responsibilities, not counting on me. After all, they are all adults. I was at peace with this decision and was much happier prioritizing my real family.